Hello, I'm Andrew Pritchard. Thank you for watching today's Northeast Regional Forecast, brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. So, checking with the radar on Friday morning, we're watching an area of showers and storms moving across parts of the Northeast region here, across parts of New York State, Pennsylvania, and then points east from there. We're also watching an area of showers and storms, some stronger storms moving across parts of the Midwest, and those will continue to track off to the east as we head through the day as well. Looking at the last 72 hours of precipitation, this has been a well-advertised corridor here from the Central Plains into parts of the Northeast region where we're seeing the repeated rounds of showers and storms tracking through the area, also bringing in some precipitation to an area that badly needs it here from the Canadian prairies into parts of the northern plains here, parts of North Dakota, Montana, and the Canadian prairies badly need the rain, and they're finally getting it there, and that is something we are happy to see. The last 30 days really shows the pattern here. If we go back to mid to late May, it was this corridor here in parts of Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri that were badly hit by very heavy rain. And then over the last 2 to 3 weeks, it's been this corridor here from the Central Plains into parts of the Midwest here, and then parts of the Northeast region here, Pennsylvania especially hit hard, and then points eastward from there as well, and south, with repeated rounds of these corridors of storms. Pennsylvania had that day there, or that week, where we had, it seemed like back-to-back days of strong to severe thunderstorms across the region. So a very active pattern across this region, but we are going to be in a transition phase, and one that's going to shift some of this precipitation activity a little bit further north as we head through the next 2 weeks. The National Blended Models forecast for the next 5 days, this takes us through June 25th now, keeping this region pretty active across the Central Plains into the Eastern Corn Belt and parts of the Northeast region. Pennsylvania especially are going to be included in that, butting up against the Eastern Corn Belt here, and then also keeping things active here from the Canadian prairies into parts of the Northern Plains. But then as we head through the next 10 days, you notice not much change across the central U.S. We get a little bit more precipitation across parts of the Northeast region here, but really keeping things active from the Canadian prairies into the Great Lakes region. We're going to go ahead and we'll talk about why here in just a moment. The week 1 precipitation anomalies from the GFS ensemble model. Now, this does go into that national blended model, but it kind of shows the pattern, the change here over the next week, between week 1 and week 2, I should say. We're watching this corridor now from the Central Plains into the Northeast region, also watching the Canadian prairies into the Northeast. Watch what happens when we go to the week 2 outlook here for the last couple days of June into early July. We start to shut things down a little bit. Now, shut down is probably the wrong term, but we pull back a bit towards a more average, more typical June pattern, not so much in the form of excess precipitation across the region, but keeping things active off to the north across parts of the Canadian prairies into the western Great Lakes. Temperatures quickly before we dive into the pattern transition. Cooler weather off to the northwest. That's because we've got that trough there with a kind of the pattern is more like this with a subtle trough in the east as well. But as we head to the 5 days that follow here, getting into the last 5 days of June, we kind of build a trough into, or shove the trough off to the west, building a ridge into the eastern parts of the eastern 2/3 of the U.S. That's going to allow some warmer temperatures to finally move back into the Northeast, making it feel a little bit more like summer as we head into the last few days of June and the beginning of July. Taking a look at the high-resolution NAM model forecast here for the next 3 days, we see the precipitation move out of the Northeast region as we get into the deeper part of the weekend, seeing the chance for maybe some isolated showers, maybe an isolated thunderstorm as we head through the day on Saturday, but really starting to see that precipitation move out. We'll play it one more time. Here we go into Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and then getting into Sunday, seeing things quiet across the Northeast region. Total precipitation accumulated here over the next 3 days. We'll go ahead and play this out. There we see the precipitation moving out of the area, New York, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts, and surrounding areas, getting some of this rain here Friday, and then seeing the streaky nature of maybe a couple isolated showers and maybe an isolated thunderstorm as we head through the day on Saturday, but relatively sparse coverage here, except for that narrow corridor as we head through the next 3 days. Now, here's the GFS ensemble model, the forecast, the transition here, and you can watch what the jet stream does as we head into the beginning of July, where we build this broader ridge over the middle part of the country. But then as we get into the beginning of July, starting to see the ridge maybe migrate toward the west a little bit, which brings northwest flow into the Northeast region. So it could be that this warmer and drier spell across the Northeast region may be a bit temporary before we bring some cooler and more active weather into the picture as we get close to the 4th of July holiday. Now, flipping over, looking at the European model in a bit of a closer picture, here's the big trough off to the west. Here is this trough in the east, and we'll watch what happens as we head through the next week or so. This trough over the northeast moves out of the region. We start to build in a broader ridge across the middle part of the country, keeping some subtle troughing over the northeast region, but this ridge will continue to expand as we head through the last couple of days of June into the very beginning of July. But we'll take a look at the jet stream support here, the jet stream winds within this transition phase, and where we see the stronger jet stream winds, that's where we have the better upper level support for more organized rain and thunderstorm activity. And so we'll go ahead and we'll just play this out. We're going to watch this first trough over the east move out of the region, but we keep this northwest flow going through the region here as we get through June 25th through June 30th or so, getting into the very first day of July. But we'll start to build this ridge in and amplify it just a little bit more as we head into the first few days of July. That may keep it a bit warmer and a little more on the dry side, but not shutting it down. We're not moving into a hot and dry pattern. It's hotter and it's drier across the northeast region as we again finish out June, move into the early part of July. 24-hour accumulated precipitation from the European model kind of highlights the pattern. Where the stronger upper level support goes, that is where the heavier, more organized precipitation goes. And so as we start things out here this weekend, we're watching this the stronger upper level support across the middle part of the country here, from the Central Plains into the Eastern Corn Belt and into parts of eventually the Northeast region. But we see the precipitation drying out as we finish up the weekend, because the trough that was in the region here to start the weekend Friday moves out of the region. But as we head into the June 25th to June 26th time period, that's when this next trough begins to push through the region. That's when we see the next chance of precipitation across the northeast region. So Friday, seeing some rain in the narrow corridor here from parts of Pennsylvania and New York, with some lighter showers across northern portions here across New York State, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. Drying out as we head through the first few days of the next week. And then as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, seeing some rain return to the area. And then as we get into the last couple days of June, the first few days of July, this is where we see the stronger upper level support now shifting off to the north. And that's why now we're slowly beginning to lift that corridor where it was across the Central Plains into the Eastern Corn Belt, and now lifting that up to the Canadian Prairies into the Great Lakes region as we again get towards the last couple of days of June. The reason we don't shut things down completely, well, we're going to keep the Gulf of Mexico wide open. So even when the stronger jet stream winds shift off to the north, we're going to keep things at least isolated in nature with thunderstorms across the Eastern Corn Belt. But keeping moisture pumping into the middle part of the country where it can interact with these stronger jet stream winds, keeping the chance for rain and thunderstorms in the forecast as we head through the end of the month. We'll go ahead and we'll just quickly play out the European model forecast here for surface pressure and precipitation, and that's where we see again. We'll go ahead and pause and we'll step through time here going back to Friday. This storm system exits the picture. We quiet down as we head through the first couple of days of the next week before we get into Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, bringing precipitation back into the northeast region as we head closer to the weekend. The total precipitation forecast now, we'll just play this out for the next week, looking at how things stack up. The heaviest precipitation falling again in a couple corridors here across the Canadian Prairies and then across the middle part of the country here, but building some precipitation at least scattered in nature, about a half of an inch to an inch across much of the northeast region over the next week. We'll finish out with high temperatures. Again, this is the boundary we've been kind of watching as the focal point for the development of showers and storms over the last few days, and that's what's kept things a bit on the cool side, and anywhere from the northern plains into the Great Lakes into the northeast region, where it's felt a little bit more like April, but maybe a muggy April, certainly a little bit more humid than we would expect in the month of April, but high temperatures in the 60s and 70s for the day on Friday across much of the northeast region. As we head into the day on Saturday, not much warmer. Sunday, we begin to build some warmth back into the region as that storm system exits the picture. Monday, high temperatures, and then we will close with Tuesday, upper 70s to the low 80s across the region as we head to the middle part of next week. As always, Eric Snodgrass will have an in-depth look at the evolution of the next 1 to 2 weeks in our Monday morning ag forecast video. And you can find your next Northeast regional forecast right here midday on Tuesday. Have a great day and have a wonderful weekend.